Welcome to Zoe Stories. Boss told me to do this, and I felt like a real woman. I never expected a simple workday to change my life forever. My name is Alex, and I'm just an ordinary guy with a desk job at a marketing firm. I've always been practical, focused, and careful, the type of person who likes predictable routines and keeps my personal life quiet. But that quiet life had its own secrets. For years, I'd nursed a private fascination with femininity, experimenting with makeup and women's clothing in the privacy of my apartment. It was a harmless escape, a curiosity I could indulge in safely behind closed doors. My relationship with Isabella was perfect on the surface. We'd been dating for 3 years, and I adored her. She was smart, confident, and had a playful streak that kept me on my toes. She didn't know about my little secret, my cross-dressing, and I intended to keep it that way. I feared her judgment, feared losing her, and yet the thought of sharing my hidden passion with her sometimes made my heart ache. It was a delicate balance, living a life split in two. The story begins on a seemingly normal morning. The sun streamed through the blinds, casting patterns across my apartment. I sipped my coffee, scrolling through emails on my laptop, preparing for a typical day at the office. I was meticulous, always early, always dressed sharply in a suit. But the thought that would haunt me that day was far from professional. My boss had sent a strange, cryptic message the night before. "Alex, come see me first thing. I have a special task for you." Special task? My mind raced. My boss, Miranda, was sharp, exacting, and utterly unpredictable. She could be charming when she wanted, but her presence always carried an edge that made you nervous. The idea of any special task made me uneasy, but I reminded myself it was probably just a new project or a client presentation. Nothing more. By the time I reached the office, my stomach was a knot of anticipation. Miranda greeted me with her usual stern smile, her heels clicking across the polished floor. "Alex," she said, her voice smooth yet commanding, "I have something different for you today." I nodded cautiously. "Of course, Miranda. What do you need me to do?" She paused, measuring my reaction. Then, with a mischievous glint in her eyes, she handed me a small box. I opened it, and my heart skipped a beat. Inside was a set of delicate women's clothing, a silky blouse, a pencil skirt, a pair of high heels, and a note that simply read, "Put these on. It's important for your next assignment." I froze, unsure if I should laugh or panic. The thought of wearing women's clothing in front of anyone, especially my boss, made my palms sweat. My mind screamed that this was absurd, humiliating even. And yet, a flicker of excitement surged through me. The fabric looked so soft, the skirt so smooth, the heels impossibly elegant. Part of me couldn't resist imagining myself in them, feeling the transformation firsthand. Miranda leaned closer, her voice soft but insistent. "Alex, this isn't a joke. I need you to do this. Consider it a test of adaptability and confidence. Do it, and you might be surprised by what you discover about yourself." Her words struck a chord I couldn't ignore. Adaptability. Confidence. The challenge wasn't just professional, it was personal. My pulse quickened as I realized I was standing at a crossroads: continue my life as usual, or step into a world that thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. I excused myself and retreated to the small restroom near her office. My hands shook as I removed my suit jacket and loosened my tie. I stared at my reflection, the familiar face of Alex staring back, but with a hint of curiosity shining through my eyes. Taking a deep breath, I opened the blouse. The silk was softer than I imagined, caressing my skin as I slipped it on. The pencil skirt hugged my hips snugly, its tailored fit accentuating contours I had only imagined. The heels were challenging, forcing me to adjust my posture, my balance, my entire presence. Standing there, in the quiet solitude of the office restroom, I felt a rush of emotion. It wasn't just the clothes. It was the sensation of stepping into someone else's skin, someone more daring, more confident, more feminine. I felt vulnerable, exposed, yet incredibly alive. My reflection stared back, a stranger and yet undeniably me. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted the blouse, and tested the heels, taking careful steps. Each movement felt different, more delicate, more deliberate, more intimate. I caught myself smiling, a flush rising to my cheeks. The thrill of transformation coursed through me like electricity. By the time I stepped out of the restroom, my nerves were taut, but I carried myself with a newfound poise. Miranda watched me with a keen eye, a small smile playing on her lips. "Excellent," she said. "Now, let's see how well you handle the rest of the day." And that's when the real challenge began. The day would push me further than I had ever imagined, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. I was about to discover a side of myself that had always been hidden, a side that craved expression, validation, and acceptance. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. The assignments that followed, the situations I would face, the choices I would make, they would transform me completely. By the end of it, I would no longer be the cautious, ordinary man who had walked into the office that morning. I would become someone new, someone daring, someone living fully in a body and identity I had only dreamed of exploring. And as I walked down the corridor, feeling the gentle sway of the skirt with each step, the click of the heels echoing behind me, I couldn't help but think, maybe this was exactly where I was meant to be. The rest of the morning unfolded like nothing I could have anticipated. Miranda's office was deceptively calm, the kind of quiet that hides tension just beneath the surface. She handed me a clipboard with a list of tasks for the day, each one vaguely professional, yet oddly specific in a way that made my heart race. "Alex," she said, her eyes glinting, "your confidence and adaptability will be tested today. Take your time, but don't hesitate. Remember, this is about presence and poise." I nodded, trying to appear calm, but my mind was spinning. Every step I took in the heels felt precarious, yet thrilling. Each sway of the skirt, the brush of silk against my skin, made me hyper-aware of my transformation. I kept adjusting my blouse, smoothing imaginary wrinkles, practicing a posture that mirrored femininity in a subtle, convincing way. My first assignment was to attend a client meeting. Normally, this would be routine. I knew the clients, the agenda, the scripts. But now, dressed like this, every word I spoke felt weighted, every gesture exaggerated. I could feel the stares of my colleagues as I walked past their desks. Some looked curious, some amused, some openly shocked. A blush rose to my cheeks, but I forced a confident stride, focusing on Miranda's words, presence and poise. The clients were even more perceptive than I had feared. As I entered the room, the initial silence was palpable. Their eyes scanned me, taking in my attire, my posture, the way my hair framed my face. My voice, when I spoke, sounded strange even to me, softer, more melodic, carrying a rhythm I wasn't used to. But the strange part was how effective it was. Every point I made seemed to land with precision. Every gesture emphasized a professionalism that surprised even me. By the time the meeting ended, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. I had navigated the situation successfully, but my mind couldn't stop replaying every glance, every smirk, every whisper I imagined behind my back. Was I convincing? Did anyone suspect? Would Miranda be pleased? Or was this just the beginning of a much more intense challenge? Back at my desk, I took a moment to breathe. The office was quiet again, yet the energy of the morning lingered. I glanced down at the outfit, the heels, the skirt, the blouse, and ran my fingers along the fabric. It felt like a secret I was carrying, a hidden power I could wield if I dared. My reflection in the dark computer screen showed someone both familiar and foreign. Alex? Or someone new? Miranda appeared at my side, holding a small box. "You did well in the meeting," she said. "But now comes the next step. This is where we test how much control you have over your transformation." Inside the box was a set of makeup, foundation, blush, eyeshadow, lipstick. My stomach twisted in anticipation. I had experimented with makeup before in private, but never in a professional setting, never under the scrutiny of someone like Miranda. "Apply this," she instructed, her tone firm but encouraging. "I want you to complete the look before the afternoon presentations." Take your time, but precision matters. I excused myself to the restroom again, my hands trembling. As I opened the makeup kit, I felt both excitement and apprehension. Every brushstroke, every dab of color, was a step deeper into this new identity. The foundation smoothed over my skin, concealing the angles and shadows I was accustomed to seeing. Blush added warmth to my cheeks, softening my features in a way that felt both alien and intoxicating. Eyeshadow highlighted my eyes, giving them a depth I had never noticed before, and lipstick completed the transformation, making my lips appear fuller, more expressive. I stared at my reflection, mesmerized. The man I had been that morning seemed distant, almost unreal. In his place was someone new, confident, polished, undeniably feminine, yet still undeniably me. A thrill coursed through me. I had never felt this alive, this visible, this exposed. Returning to Miranda, I noticed the subtle way she evaluated me. Her eyes flicked over the finished look, lingering just long enough to make my heart pound. "Excellent," she said. "Now, for the final part of this phase, you'll attend a video conference with our international clients. They won't know it's you, but they will judge your presence, your ability to command attention, and your poise. Are you ready?" I nodded, though my throat felt dry. The conference began, and I was hyper-aware of every detail, the angle of my shoulders, the tilt of my head, the cadence of my voice. My colleagues watched from nearby desks, some whispering, some observing with quiet amusement. Every interaction was a test of my adaptability, and every response I gave reinforced the strange duality I was living. By the end of the conference, I realized I had been holding my breath for nearly an hour. I had successfully navigated multiple challenges, yet the emotional intensity of the morning left me drained and exhilarated in equal measure. I was beginning to understand the power of this transformation, not just as a secret thrill, but as a profound change in how I perceived myself and how others perceived me. Miranda's voice cut through my thoughts. "Good work, Alex. But the real test begins after hours. I need you to stay late today alone. That's when we see how deeply this experience can shape you." My pulse quickened at the implication. Alone, late, dressed like this, under Miranda's instruction. The suspense was electric. I knew I was being pushed far beyond professional boundaries into a space that was intensely personal. The mixture of fear, excitement, and curiosity created a tension that I couldn't ignore. As the office emptied, I lingered at my desk, feeling the soft sway of my skirt with every movement. The building was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights the only accompaniment to my racing thoughts. I thought of Isabella and how different my life might seem if she ever knew about this side of me. The thrill of secrecy, the danger of discovery, and the intoxicating allure of my new persona combined into a heady cocktail of emotion. And I realized this was only the beginning. The coming hours, the challenges Miranda had planned, would push me further into a world I had only dared to imagine. The thrill of transformation, the suspense of secrecy, and the emotional intensity of living between two identities would define everything to come. The office was empty now, the dim light casting long shadows across the desks. I sat at mine, heels tapping lightly against the floor, my fingers idly brushing the smooth fabric of my skirt. The solitude was both liberating and terrifying. I felt exposed, yet strangely powerful, a sensation I had never experienced before in such a raw, unguarded form. Miranda's instructions echoed in my mind: stay late, alone, and embrace the transformation fully. That meant more than just wearing the clothes or makeup. It meant embodying the persona, feeling every movement, every gesture, every sensation with heightened awareness. I took a deep breath, adjusted my blouse, and smoothed my hair one last time before moving on to the next task. The first step was posture. Miranda had emphasized poise in earlier instructions, but now it felt like a test of endurance. I practiced walking across the office, heels clicking against the tile. Each step was deliberate, exaggerated just enough to be graceful, but not unnatural. My arms swayed slightly, shoulders lifted, back straightened. I could feel the subtle pull of the blouse against my skin, the weight of my newly applied makeup highlighting every curve and angle of my face. Next was voice. Sitting at my desk, I began reading aloud the reports I had prepared for the afternoon meeting, but this time with an emphasis on softness and clarity. My words took on a melodic rhythm I had never noticed before, carrying an undertone of authority laced with elegance. Every sentence felt foreign and yet exhilarating. I could sense the power in the change, how a simple shift in tone could alter perceptions completely. Then came the experiment with expression. I studied my reflection in the dark computer screen, practicing smiles, subtle head tilts, and gestures that conveyed charm and composure. The experience was strangely intoxicating. With each motion, I felt more like someone new, yet every fiber of my old self struggled against the foreign persona. My heart raced as I realized the depth of the transformation. This wasn't just about clothes and makeup, it was about inhabiting a role, feeling it seep into my bones, and projecting it to the world. Suddenly, a faint noise made me freeze. The hum of the building seemed to shift, a soft echo of footsteps, or maybe just the wind through the vents. My pulse quickened. Was someone coming? I glanced nervously at the clock. No one should be here at this hour. Still, the suspense made my skin tingle. I imagined Miranda watching from afar, evaluating my reactions, noting how I handled this unplanned tension. To distract myself, I turned to the next layer of transformation, gestures and demeanor. I reached for a small mirror I had tucked in my desk drawer and began practicing hand movements, the subtle grace of fingers brushing hair, the tilt of the wrist while adjusting a sleeve, the delicate motion of picking up a pen. Each action, though minute, carried a weight now, a significance that was both foreign and intoxicating. I realized how much I had underestimated the complexity of embodying femininity. Hours passed, each minute stretching and elongating as I immersed myself in the exercise. I tested different sitting positions, the way I crossed my legs, the slight adjustment of my skirt to maintain a poised appearance. I caught myself smiling at my reflection more often than I could count, marveling at the person staring back, confident, elegant, and utterly transformed. But the excitement was interlaced with unease. I thought of Isabella, my girlfriend, and the life waiting for me outside this office. How would she react if she saw me like this? Could she ever understand the thrill, the fear, the intoxicating sensation of living on the edge of identity? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Then came the next challenge Miranda had left, a set of personal tasks designed to push boundaries. Notes on posture, expression, and gestures were followed by instructions to practice calling a client over the phone. The voice had to be feminine, authoritative, persuasive, a combination I found both difficult and thrilling. Each time I spoke into the receiver, I could feel the tension building, my own reflection in the phone screen amplifying the duality of my existence. I hung up and exhaled slowly. The office was silent, the only sounds my breathing and the faint hum of the lights. My fingers trembled slightly as I rested them in my lap. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, yet an adrenaline-fueled energy coursed through me. The transformation had begun to feel permanent, at least in sensation if not in reality. Finally, I approached the last mirror in the office, the large one in the conference room. Standing before it, I studied the lines of my body, the softness of my features, the subtle strength in my posture. This reflection wasn't just Alex, it was a hybrid, a new identity, fragile yet commanding, thrilling yet terrifying. The suspense of living this dual life, the secret thrill of stepping further into femininity, gripped me completely. And I knew that when Miranda returned tomorrow, the next phase would be even more intense. The line between my old self and this new persona was blurring. The excitement of discovery and the fear of exposure combined to create a potent, almost addictive tension that left me both exhilarated and terrified. The next day arrived with a tension that gnawed at me from the inside. I had barely slept, tossing and turning as the duality of my identity replayed in my mind. The previous night's exercises with posture, voice, and gestures had left me both exhilarated and exhausted. Yet, the thought of facing Miranda's next set of challenges sent an adrenaline rush through me I could hardly resist. By mid-morning, the office was quieter than usual. I had arrived early, hoping to get a head start on the next set of instructions. Sitting at my desk, I carefully selected an outfit Miranda had left for me. A sleek, form-fitting pencil skirt paired with a silky blouse that hugged my figure in all the right places. The fabric felt smooth against my skin, almost electric, sending shivers up my spine. As I dressed, I caught glimpses of myself in the reflective surfaces around the office. Every adjustment of the blouse, every tilt of my head as I brushed my hair, reinforced the change. My transformation was no longer just about clothes, it was a complete immersion into another persona. The more I looked at myself, the more the old Alex seemed distant, like a shadow fading into the background. Makeup came next, delicate layers of foundation, blush, eyeliner, and a soft lipstick that made my lips appear fuller and more expressive. Each stroke was deliberate, a ritual that deepened the sense of becoming. The scent of the cosmetic products mingled with the faint hum of the office, creating a strangely comforting atmosphere. When I finally stepped back, the reflection staring at me was almost unrecognizable. It was me, yet entirely not me, a living paradox of identity and performance. Miranda's instructions for today were clear. Practice interacting as this new persona, not just in isolation, but as if someone were watching. I began rehearsing a series of small, seemingly mundane tasks, walking across the office, answering emails, even sipping water with grace. Each motion was exaggerated, practiced, perfected. The thrill of embodying femininity, of feeling powerful in a body and presentation I had never occupied before, surged through me. But with each practiced gesture, anxiety crept in. What if someone entered unexpectedly? What if Isabella were to see me like this? The thought made my pulse quicken, my heart hammering in my chest. I realized how addictive the suspense had become, the thrill of performance interlaced with the fear of exposure. My body reacted automatically, posture straightening, hands moving gracefully, voice softening when I spoke aloud to myself. Midway through the morning, I attempted a small experiment Miranda had suggested, leaving my chair and walking to the break room, imagining I was being observed. Each step was deliberate, heels clicking softly on the floor, hips swaying slightly. I practiced subtle glances, gentle smiles, and small hand movements that conveyed elegance and poise. The reflection in the window caught me, and I froze, studying the figure staring back. I looked confident, commanding yet delicate, thrilling yet fragile. The next challenge was interaction. I picked up the office phone, rehearsing a call to a client, using a feminine, professional tone. My voice wavered at first, betraying a hint of hesitation, but I quickly corrected it. Each sentence flowed smoother than the last, the cadence more natural, more persuasive. I imagined the client listening, impressed by my poise, unaware of the secret undercurrent of tension I carried. The exercise was exhausting, yet exhilarating, a delicate balance of control and surrender. As the afternoon wore on, I moved to a more complex exercise, reading aloud an internal memo with deliberate charm and nuance, emphasizing both authority and approachability. Each word was a test, each gesture a probe into how convincingly I could inhabit this new persona. I caught myself smiling, almost involuntarily, at the thrill of it. The sense of control, of power, and of vulnerability all intertwined, creating a heady mixture I could neither resist nor escape. Then came a sudden moment of tension. A faint sound echoed from the hallway. Footsteps? My breath caught in my throat. I froze mid-motion, heart racing. No one should be here yet. Was it Isabella? Had someone discovered me? I clutched the hem of my skirt, forcing myself to remain poised. After a few tense seconds, the sound faded. I exhaled slowly, realizing how deeply the suspense had begun to affect me. The thrill was intoxicating, the fear equally sharp, each emotion amplifying the other. Finally, I sat back at my desk, adjusting my skirt and smoothing my hair. My reflection in the dark computer screen stared back, confident, graceful, and entirely transformed. The duality of my existence, Alex and this new persona, was no longer theoretical. It had begun to merge, to inhabit the same space, and I could feel the boundaries between them blurring. By the time Miranda arrived later that evening, I was ready. Every gesture, every expression, every subtle movement had been rehearsed, polished, and internalized. I was no longer just Alex trying to cross-dress. I was a new entity, fully immersed, aware of every sensation, every risk, every thrill of being caught. The suspense of living this dual life had become a part of me, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. The evening settled into a quiet rhythm, but my mind was far from calm. Each day, each exercise Miranda assigned, blurred the lines of my old life. I found myself savoring the anticipation of being observed, the subtle thrill that came with practicing movements, gestures, and expressions that felt entirely foreign yet intoxicatingly natural. The office, empty and hushed, became a stage for my transformation, every corner a mirror reflecting my duality. Miranda's latest instructions were clear: practice public poise while maintaining a sense of mystery. The goal was not just to act like a woman, but to embody the confidence, elegance, and allure of someone entirely self-assured. I started with my posture, standing tall, shoulders back, chin slightly raised. Each breath felt heavier, more deliberate, as if every inhale and exhale was a meditation on control. Next came movement. Walking across the open floor space, I paid attention to the subtle sway of my hips, the rhythm of my heels clicking against the floor. It was mesmerizing, every step a combination of caution and deliberate flair. I felt a strange exhilaration, knowing that if anyone were to enter unexpectedly, I would appear flawless, as if nothing about me had changed. But beneath the surface, my heart raced with fear of discovery. Each imagined observer intensified the suspense, making every motion sharper, more precise. Miranda had also emphasized voice modulation. I practiced speaking in different tones, soft yet authoritative, playful yet composed. I recited phrases, short dialogues, and imaginary exchanges, all designed to test how naturally I could sustain this new identity. My voice occasionally faltered, revealing the tension beneath the surface, but I corrected myself, smoothing the edges until the words felt convincing. The more I spoke, the more the old Alex seemed to fade into the background. By mid-evening, I decided to simulate a scenario Miranda had mentioned, encountering a colleague unexpectedly. I placed an empty chair across the room as a stand-in, imagining the presence of someone scrutinizing my every gesture. Each movement, turning my head, adjusting my hair, picking up a document, became a test of elegance under pressure. The imagined eyes watching me heightened the suspense, making each action feel charged with stakes I had never imagined. As I practiced, I began to notice the subtle effects of my transformation beyond posture and voice. There was a shift in how I carried myself, a heightened awareness of gestures, expressions, and even breathing. The thrill of embodying femininity, of inhabiting a body that felt both alien and intoxicatingly right, mingled with anxiety. I felt powerful yet vulnerable, confident yet exposed. Every reflection, every imagined observer, magnified this paradox. At one point, I caught a glimpse of myself in the polished glass of the office cabinet. The figure staring back was mesmerizing, delicate features enhanced by makeup, confident posture, and an elegance I had never known I could project. Yet, underneath it all, my heart raced with tension. Could I maintain this persona if someone actually entered? Would Isabella recognize the changes, or worse, suspect the truth? The questions lingered, sharp and unsettling. The evening wore on, and I moved to a final exercise, interacting with my environment as if fully immersed in my new identity. I poured a cup of coffee, held it gracefully, and sipped, paying attention to the subtle tilt of my head, the movement of my fingers around the handle. I moved papers, adjusted my chair, and practiced casual gestures, all with the heightened awareness of someone performing for an unseen audience. Each task, though mundane, carried the weight of suspense, making the practice simultaneously exhausting and addictive. By the time Miranda called it a day, I was both exhilarated and drained. The exercises had pushed me further than ever, forcing me to inhabit a persona that felt increasingly real. The tension of potential exposure, combined with the thrill of transformation, had become intoxicating, a delicate mix of fear and fascination that I couldn't resist. As I left the office, my reflection in the hallway mirror caught me once more, poised, graceful, and undeniably changed. The duality of Alex and this new persona was no longer just a concept. It was becoming my reality, and the suspense of sustaining it was a delicious, nerve-wracking addiction. The next morning, I woke with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The previous day's exercises had pushed me to the edge of my comfort zone, and now the tension lingered like an invisible weight. Every sound, every movement in the apartment felt amplified, a creak in the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, even the distant chatter from the street outside. I couldn't shake the awareness that my dual life was no longer just a private experiment. It was becoming a constant presence in my mind. Miranda had left new instructions on the kitchen table. Today's focus was about complete immersion, not just posture or voice, but mindset. I was to behave, think, and even feel as the persona I had been cultivating. I stared at the note, my heart racing. How far could I go? Could I truly erase Alex for hours at a time, becoming someone entirely new? I began with the ritual of transformation. The outfit was waiting, a chic dress in soft pastel tones, paired with delicate heels. I ran my fingers over the fabric, feeling the difference from my usual clothing, the way it draped over my body, how it accentuated curves I hadn't noticed before. I dressed carefully, each movement precise, internalizing the shift. My reflection in the hallway mirror made me pause. It was becoming harder to distinguish between Alex and this new self. Next came makeup. Each brushstroke felt almost meditative, a ritual that heightened my awareness of every detail. Foundation smoothed my skin, blush added warmth to my cheeks, eyeliner sharpened my gaze, and lipstick completed the illusion. The more I applied, the more I felt a strange liberation, not just a mask, but a merging of identities. I was Alex, yes, but also her, poised, elegant, and undeniably feminine. The true test came as I moved around the apartment, performing ordinary tasks with heightened awareness. Pouring coffee, answering texts, even checking the mail. Every movement was deliberate, measured, graceful. I could feel my posture change, my voice soften, my gestures become delicate. The thrill of performing in secrecy surged through me, and with it, a lingering fear. What if someone walked in unannounced? The suspense was addictive, a mix of fear and exhilaration that left my pulse racing. I practiced speaking aloud, imagining Isabella returning home early. How would she react if she saw me like this? I rehearsed explanations, excuses, even casual remarks, testing different tones and inflections. Each sentence was an experiment, each word a delicate balance between honesty and concealment. The anxiety gnawed at me, yet it fueled the performance. The higher the stakes, the more intense the transformation felt. By late morning, I decided to venture slightly outside the apartment, testing how fully I could inhabit this new persona in a semi-public setting. A quick trip to the nearby store, heels clicking softly against the pavement, dress flowing with each step. Every glance from passers-by felt like a test. Could I maintain composure if someone looked too closely? Each hesitant look, each curious glance, heightened the suspense, but also reinforced the thrill of my transformation. Returning home, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The city light played across my features, highlighting the subtle curves and angles that had once felt foreign. I barely recognized myself, and yet the recognition was intoxicating. Alex was still there, a quiet presence beneath the surface, but this new persona was dominant, commanding my attention, reshaping my reality. By evening, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. I had pushed further than ever before, testing both physical and emotional limits. Miranda's exercises had succeeded. I was no longer simply practicing transformation. I was living it. The suspense of potential exposure, the thrill of embodying someone entirely new, and the vulnerability of revealing myself to a world that didn't know, all of it had become a heady mix I could neither ignore nor escape. Sitting alone in the dim light of the apartment, I reflected on the journey so far. The fear of being caught, the secret thrill of performing, the intoxicating liberation of a new identity, all intertwined into a tapestry of tension and transformation. I realized that this was only the beginning. The stakes were about to rise, and the next phase promised challenges that would test not just my ability to perform, but my very sense of self. The following morning, a tense stillness filled the apartment. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting slanted lines across the floor, yet the warmth did nothing to soothe the unease coiling in my chest. Today, Miranda had hinted, would test me in ways I had never imagined. Real-world stakes, unpredictable encounters, and the challenge of maintaining composure under pressure. I began with my usual ritual: dressing, makeup, and the subtle adjustments that transformed Alex into her. Each movement was deliberate, each brushstroke of lipstick and each swipe of mascara reinforcing the persona I had been perfecting. But there was an edge to it now, a sharp awareness that this was more than practice, a true trial. The apartment no longer felt safe. Every creak, every passing car outside seemed amplified, like the universe itself was scrutinizing my transformation. I paced the living room, rehearsing lines and gestures, when a sudden knock at the door made my heart lurch. My pulse quickened, and for a split second, fear overtook me. I wasn't ready. The knock came again, deliberate, almost accusing. Whoever it was, they were approaching at the exact moment when I was most vulnerable, fully immersed in my feminine guise. Swallowing hard, I smoothed my dress and adjusted my hair, moving toward the door with measured steps. Peering through the peephole, I saw no one I recognized, yet the threat remained tangible. Each breath was heavy with suspense, every muscle tensed in anticipation. I opened the door cautiously and found a delivery courier holding a large, unexpected package. Relief washed over me, mingled with the lingering tension. Yet as I signed and accepted the package, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a prelude, a test designed to see how I would react under scrutiny. Once the door closed, I inspected the box. It contained a set of intricate accessories, high heels, jewelry, and a note from Miranda. Today, your public composure will be tested. Use these wisely. My stomach flipped. A real-world test of transformation, in public, with no safety net. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. This wasn't just an experiment anymore. It was a gauntlet, and I had no choice but to run it. I donned the new heels, feeling the unfamiliar strain on my calves and the sway in my step. Each click against the hardwood floor sounded exaggeratedly loud, each movement a reminder of the stakes. I added jewelry, adjusting earrings and bracelets, practicing the subtle gestures that made the persona convincing. With every detail, I felt the old Alex receding further, replaced by someone who could, at least outwardly, command attention and admiration. Miranda's note also contained instructions for a public interaction, a brief visit to a nearby cafe, blending in as completely as possible, maintaining composure and elegance under observation. The cafe was bustling, a perfect arena for the challenge. I took a deep breath, each inhale a mixture of excitement and dread, and stepped outside. The city air was crisp, each sound amplified, each passerby a potential observer. My heart raced with a thrill of being seen, of performing under pressure, of risking exposure for the sake of transformation. At the cafe, I moved with deliberate elegance, navigating between tables, selecting a seat near a window, and ordering a coffee with a practiced, feminine intonation. Every gesture, from tucking my hair behind my ear to adjusting my posture, was scrutinized by imaginary eyes. The real patrons likely noticed nothing, yet in my mind, every glance carried judgment, curiosity, or suspicion. I sipped my coffee slowly, maintaining composure, feeling the intoxicating mix of fear and exhilaration that came with performing flawlessly in public. Midway through, a familiar voice startled me, one of my colleagues from work, passing by the cafe. My stomach twisted. Recognition? Exposure? Panic threatened to unravel my carefully constructed persona. I smiled, measured, and waved casually, my voice modulating to the practiced tone Miranda had drilled into me. The colleague merely nodded and continued walking, oblivious to the transformation before them. Relief flooded me, but the suspense lingered. Each encounter, each observer, felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm. By the time I returned home, the exhilaration was tempered by exhaustion. The day's challenges had pushed me further than ever, forcing me to inhabit a new identity under pressure, in real-world circumstances, with real consequences. The thrill of transformation and the fear of exposure had merged into a singular, electrifying experience, leaving me both empowered and vulnerable. Sitting alone, I stared into the mirror, tracing the lines of my new self. The reflection was no longer a fleeting experiment. It was becoming reality. The suspense, the thrill, the tension, they had all escalated into a new plane, and I knew that what came next would push me even further, threatening not only my secrets, but the very core of my identity. The next challenge began as soon as I stepped out of my apartment the following day. Miranda had arranged a more intimate, high-pressure test, a private dinner at an upscale restaurant, ostensibly with a client, but in reality a psychological trial. I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. This was not just a performance, it was an exposure to social scrutiny with no safety net. I dressed meticulously, choosing a sleek, form-fitting dress in deep burgundy, paired with stilettos that made my calves ache just thinking about them. Every detail was calculated, from my earrings to my handbag, everything designed to amplify my feminine presence. As I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the reflection staring back. Alex's familiar features had softened, replaced by the elegance and poise of the persona I had been practicing for weeks. My pulse quickened, not with vanity, but with tension. The stakes were higher than ever. On the way to the restaurant, I rehearsed my lines and gestures mentally. Every step in the heels was a reminder of my vulnerability. Every glance in passing shop windows reflected a stranger staring back, judging, testing, analyzing. It wasn't just about appearance anymore, it was about behavior, voice, demeanor, and subtlety. I had to convince not just myself, but anyone who saw me that this identity was real. Upon arrival, the restaurant buzzed with low conversation and clinking cutlery. I felt the heat of multiple eyes as I walked in, each step a careful balancing act. Miranda was already there, seated at a corner table, her expression unreadable. I approached, heart hammering, and took the seat opposite her. "You look convincing," she said, her tone neutral but layered with an edge that made my stomach twist. I smiled politely, keeping my hands folded gracefully on the table, feeling every ounce of tension in my shoulders. This was no casual dinner, it was an examination, and every small slip could expose me. Miranda began a series of subtle tests, commenting casually on my posture, asking pointed questions about my daily habits, observing my responses. I answered each one carefully, adjusting tone, expressions, and gestures to maintain the illusion. The adrenaline coursed through me. Every nerve felt alive with the intensity of scrutiny. Midway through the dinner, the first true obstacle appeared. A waiter dropped a tray nearby, sending glasses clattering. The sudden noise startled me, and I almost spilled my wine. Panic flared, but I quickly composed myself, smoothing my dress and regaining posture. Miranda's sharp gaze met mine for a brief second. She had noticed, of course, but said nothing. The silent acknowledgement of my vulnerability heightened the suspense, reminding me that every movement, every expression was under observation. I tried to focus on the experience, the food, the ambience, the performance, but the tension never left. Every passing diner, every server's glance, became an imagined critique. I realized that the thrill of transformation was inseparable from the constant fear of exposure. The two emotions intertwined, creating a cocktail of vulnerability and exhilaration that left me simultaneously terrified and empowered. By the end of the dinner, Miranda delivered her final subtle test. She handed me a small, elegantly wrapped box with a note. Next step: private encounter. Complete immersion required. No reverting. Trust the process. My pulse raced. The instructions were cryptic, the stakes unclear, but the implication was undeniable. The next phase would push me further than ever, challenging not only my ability to maintain a facade but also my understanding of who I truly was. Leaving the restaurant, I walked through the quiet streets, heels clicking softly against the pavement. The cool night air contrasted with the heat of adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I understood now that the buildup of these weeks, the careful lessons, the practice, the controlled exercises, had all led to this moment. The suspense was no longer hypothetical. It was real, palpable, and inescapable. As I approached my apartment, I paused, looking at my reflection in a store window. The transformation was complete. Alex and the new persona had merged in ways I hadn't anticipated. But the thought of the next test, private, personal, unavoidable, left me trembling with both anticipation and fear. I knew that whatever happened next could change everything, not just my secret, but my identity itself. The next phase began in a way I never expected. I received a message from Miranda. Meet me at the studio. Alone. Tonight. Fully prepared. No explanation, just a time and place. My chest tightened. This wasn't public scrutiny. This was personal, private, and undeniably intimate. I knew that entering this space meant surrendering entirely to the process, to the persona, and perhaps even to Miranda's control. I arrived at the studio, an elegant loft with floor-to-ceiling mirrors, soft lighting, and faint music playing in the background. The room smelled faintly of perfume and fabric, a mixture of sophistication and subtle power. Miranda greeted me with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tonight, you'll see how far your transformation can truly go, she said. The words were both a promise and a warning. I changed into the outfit she had left for me earlier, a delicate pastel dress, tight at the waist and flowing elegantly at the hips, paired with heels that made every step deliberate. The moment I put it on, I felt a shiver run through me. This wasn't just clothes, it was an identity being forced into every fiber of my body. I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Alex, the man I had known, was fading. In his place was someone fluid, feminine, aware of her allure and vulnerability. Miranda handed me a set of instructions, simple yet unnerving. Walk, speak, move. Act as her fully. No hesitation. No breaks. Her tone was calm, but I felt the weight of expectation pressing on me like a physical force. I took a deep breath and began. The studio became my stage. I moved across the floor, each step a careful negotiation between grace and authenticity. The mirrors reflected every movement, every gesture, every trembling muscle trying to embody this new version of myself. Halfway through, Miranda introduced the first real challenge, a live video feed of strangers watching me on screens positioned around the room. I realized immediately that this was more than performance. It was observation, judgment, exposure. I could hear their whispers, see their eyes analyzing every nuance, yet I was alone, defenseless, compelled to act perfectly. My stomach twisted with fear, but also with a strange thrill. The presence of invisible observers made every gesture more electric, every smile more deliberate. Then came a twist I hadn't anticipated. A mechanical device, a subtle neurostimulator Miranda had mentioned during earlier sessions, was activated. I felt a tingling, a gentle pressure behind my temples that made my thoughts slow and soft, my emotions heighten. Fear and excitement blended into a surreal haze. My movements became instinctual, almost automatic, as if the new persona was asserting control over my body, overriding hesitation. I felt Alex's resistance fading. Not completely gone, but diluted, softened. I try to speak, to maintain some semblance of conversation with Miranda, but my voice came out lighter, softer, tinged with femininity I hadn't consciously invoked. I stumbled slightly, then caught myself, realizing that even the slips now were part of the process. The deeper I surrendered, the more real the transformation became. Time became a blur. Every instruction, every observation, every reflection in the mirrors reinforced the sense that this was no longer temporary experimentation. I was being reshaped, mind, body, and identity, in ways I could neither fully control nor resist. Miranda's calm voice guided me, corrected me, encouraged me, and I followed instinctively, each step and gesture pushing me further into this strange, intoxicating, and suspenseful reality. By the end of the session, I was exhausted yet electrified. My reflection was no longer a duality of Alex and the persona. It was a new singular self, a fragile fusion of past and present, of control and surrender. Miranda observed silently, her gaze unreadable, as I stood in the center of the room, trembling slightly but aware of a transformation deeper than physical. "This is only the beginning," she said, her words calm but heavy. I understood then that the suspense, the thrill, and the tension would only escalate from here. The challenges weren't over. They had only evolved, shifting from observation to control, from practice to immersive reality. The following days blurred into a strange rhythm of anticipation and dread. Miranda's instructions became increasingly precise, increasingly invasive. I was no longer just performing, I was living the persona. Even simple tasks, walking down the street, speaking to a neighbor, ordering coffee, felt like auditions. Every mirror, every reflection, reminded me that Alex was slipping further away, replaced by someone elegant, aware, and fragile in ways I hadn't imagined. Then came the ultimate test, a private gathering at Miranda's luxurious apartment, a small circle of carefully selected friends who knew nothing of me. The purpose wasn't simply to perform, it was to survive scrutiny. Miranda explained it with a quiet intensity. They will see only her. No slips. No hesitation. If you falter, you start over. I arrived early, dressed in a pale blue cocktail dress that hugged my frame delicately. My makeup was flawless. Shadows, liner, blush, lips. All chosen to enhance femininity without exaggeration. The heels I wore made my legs ache, but they also forced me to walk with poise. My pulse thudded in my ears. This was no longer just about appearance, it was about presence, charisma, control. As the guests arrived, I felt a surge of panic. Every step toward them felt weighted with potential exposure. Each person's glance seemed magnified, each smile a potential judgment. I greeted them with warmth, fluidity, and a grace that felt almost alien to me. Miranda watched from the background, a calm anchor, silently correcting my posture, gestures, and inflection. The first challenge came immediately. One of the guests, a friend of Miranda's, leaned closer and commented, "You have such an interesting energy. What's your secret?" My heart raced. I smiled, tilting my head delicately, and responded, "Just enjoying the moment, I guess." My voice felt strange, softer, more melodic, yet it carried conviction. The guest nodded approvingly, seemingly satisfied, but the tension didn't ease. Each word, each glance, was an invisible thread connecting me to the persona, demanding perfection. Then a minor disaster struck. A chair creaked, my heel slipped slightly on the polished floor, and I nearly lost my balance. Gasps from a few of the guests made my stomach flip. Instantly, I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, and my hands trembled slightly. Miranda's quiet voice reached me. "Recover. Flow. Confidence." I steadied myself, adjusted my posture, and smiled as though nothing had happened. The mirrors along the walls reflected my recovery, a visual reminder that appearances were everything. As the evening progressed, Miranda introduced another twist, subtle suggestions whispered in my ear, guiding my gestures, influencing my reactions. My thoughts blurred. Alex's internal resistance weakened with every cue. I felt increasingly like a marionette, every string pulled by Miranda's will, yet paradoxically, the control I had surrendered made the persona feel more real than ever. The climax of the night came when Miranda asked me to dance with a guest. Music filled the room, slow and intoxicating. I moved, each step carefully controlled, each gesture calculated for grace. The sensation of being observed while performing intimate movements created a tension unlike anything I had felt before. My heart raced, my mind screamed with fear, but the persona responded instinctively, fluidly. I was no longer Alex thinking of himself as her. I was fully inhabiting the new identity. When the song ended, applause broke out. I smiled, curtsied, and felt a rush of adrenaline and fear mingle inside me. Miranda's eyes met mine. No words were needed. The message was clear. I had passed this round, but the transformation was far from complete. The suspense lingered like a tangible presence, reminding me that the next stage would push boundaries even further, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. I left Miranda's apartment that night, heels clicking on the pavement, chest tight with tension and exhilaration. The streets felt foreign. The reflections in shop windows reminded me of my dual existence, and the thought of tomorrow's unknown challenge made my stomach churn. I was exhilarated, terrified, and undeniably transformed. The final night arrived, and with it, a sense of inevitability that made my pulse hammer in my chest. Miranda had called it the ultimate immersion. No instructions, no rehearsals, just me, the persona, and a room designed to test every aspect of my control and composure. The apartment had been transformed, soft lighting, a full-length mirror on one wall, and subtle props placed strategically, a discarded wig, high heels slightly askew, and a delicate dress draped over a chair. Each item seemed symbolic, an invitation to slip, to falter, to reveal the fragile line between Alex and the persona. I stepped inside, dressed in a sleek, lavender gown that clung gently to my body. Every curve, every line, every detail had been carefully chosen by Miranda, emphasizing elegance and vulnerability. I felt my hands tremble as I smoothed the fabric, adjusted the neckline, and took a deep breath. The reflection in the mirror was breathtaking, not just because of the outfit, but because it revealed how far I had been reshaped, how completely the persona had taken hold. Alex was no longer fully present. The woman in the mirror was dominant, undeniable. Miranda's voice broke the silence. Tonight, you will confront yourself. Every fear, every hesitation. No distractions. No escapes. Do you understand? I nodded, though the words made my stomach knot. This wasn't just a performance. This was confrontation with myself, with what I had become, with the line I had crossed. The first challenge was physical. Miranda asked me to move around the room on high heels, performing a series of gestures and poses she instructed. Normally, I would have struggled, but instinctively, my body followed the cues, each movement fluid, each step deliberate. The mirrors reflected not only my external form but the tension inside me, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and undeniable thrill. My hands brushed over the props, the wig, the discarded shoes, each one a symbolic reminder of my dual identity. Then came the emotional test. Miranda instructed me to speak aloud, recounting Alex's memories, fears, and desires, but from the perspective of the persona. My voice wavered at first, trembling as I relived moments of shame and exhilaration, moments of desire and vulnerability. With each word, I felt the old self weaken, replaced by someone entirely new, confident yet fragile, seductive yet innocent. The act of verbalizing these thoughts in front of the mirror, in front of Miranda, was transformative and terrifying. Suddenly, an unexpected twist escalated the suspense. A knock at the door. My heart stopped. No one had been expected. Miranda glanced at me and whispered, "Decide quickly, Alex or her?" The seconds stretched. I moved toward the door, every step echoing in the stillness. My mind raced. Should I retreat, change back into Alex, or fully embrace the persona. The decision was mine, and it would define the final boundary between past and present. I opened the door to find a stranger, part of the test, smiling politely. I was told someone would meet me here, they said. My first instinct was panic, but then the persona took over. I smiled, a delicate, rehearsed smile, and gestured for them to come in. Every movement, every word, flowed naturally. I was no longer Alex thinking through actions. I was fully inhabiting this new self. The room became a stage for authenticity, control, and seduction, all while tension crackled in the air. By the end of the night, I was exhausted, trembling, and exhilarated. Miranda's quiet approval was all I needed. I had survived the ultimate test, passed through trials of physicality, emotion, and suspense. The mirrors reflected a singular identity, not Alex, not just a persona, but a fusion of both. My transformation was complete, yet the story wasn't over. The suspense lingered, a silent reminder that control was fleeting, identity was fluid, and every choice carried consequences. As I left the apartment, heels clicking against the polished floor, the city outside seemed sharper, brighter, more alive. Every reflection reminded me of the journey I had undergone, terrifying, intoxicating, and utterly irreversible. The persona was no longer an experiment. It was my reality. The suspense, the thrill, and the emotional drama would continue to follow me, leaving both me and the audience wondering, how far could this go? The city streets were quiet as I stepped out of Miranda's apartment building, the cool night air brushing against my face. Every sound seemed amplified, the distant hum of traffic, the faint chatter of pedestrians, even the soft clicking of my heels against the pavement. Each step was a reminder that the transformation I had endured was no longer confined to a controlled space. Alex had faded. The woman in the mirror had emerged. I paused at the corner, staring at my reflection in a shop window. The figure staring back was elegant, poised, and undeniably feminine. I traced the contour of my face, the curve of my lips, the way the dress hugged my frame. For a fleeting moment, a pang of nostalgia for Alex hit me, but it was quickly drowned by the thrill of this new identity. I felt empowered, yet incredibly vulnerable, a duality that made my heart race. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. Are you ready for the next step? Or will you run back to what you were? My hands trembled as I read the words. Miranda hadn't warned me about this, yet the tone was unmistakably hers, or someone like her. I stared at the message, heart pounding, mind racing. Was this another layer of the experiment, or a warning that the control I had fought to maintain was still fragile? A car horn blared in the distance, snapping me back to reality. The streets were emptying, and the sense of exposure pressed down on me. Every glance from a passerby felt loaded with potential discovery, every reflection a mirror of judgment. I felt a shiver run down my spine, an intoxicating mixture of fear and exhilaration. The city was no longer a backdrop. It was part of the test, part of the suspense, part of the transformation itself. As I walked toward home, a shadow fell across the pavement. I froze. A figure stepped out of the darkness, stopping a few feet away. Familiar, yet unfamiliar, a presence that sent my heart into overdrive. My mind raced, friend or foe, test or threat. The figure didn't speak, only watched. I tried to steady my breathing, to maintain the poise I had cultivated over countless rehearsals, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. In that moment, a thought struck me with terrifying clarity. No matter how perfect the performance, no matter how convincing the persona, there was always the risk of exposure. The lines between Alex and the persona were blurred, but they were not erased. Every choice, every step, every smile carried weight, and one misstep could unravel everything. The figure finally spoke, a low, deliberate voice. You've come a long way, but the real challenge begins now. My heart skipped a beat. Recognition flashed in my mind. The voice was neither Miranda's, nor anyone I had expected. A cold thrill ran through me. The suspense, the drama, The emotional tension, it wasn't over. It was only beginning. I took a cautious step forward, heels clicking softly, every nerve on edge. The figure tilted their head, as if weighing me, testing me. And in that instant, I realized the truth. The transformation had not ended with the mirrors, the gowns, or the performances. It was ongoing, relentless, and inescapable. I had become part of a world where identity, desire, and control intertwined, where the thrill of the unknown was a constant companion. As the figure vanished into the shadows, I was left alone on the empty street, the message still glowing on my phone. My reflection in a nearby window reminded me that nothing was certain. Who was I now? Alex, the persona, or something in between? And most importantly, what would tomorrow bring? The suspense hung in the air like electricity, unresolved, tantalizing, and dangerous. Viewers were left on the edge. Would I be able to navigate the next challenge, maintain the persona, or would the past claw back with devastating consequences? The story ended, for now, in a tension-filled silence, leaving questions unanswered, hearts racing, and minds craving more.